Welcome to Understanding Title Protection. Shannon is going to share here in a minute exactly why we're having this conversation. It shouldn't be lost on many of you as to why we are, but in fact, there is a real reason it was driven by you all. We have an incredible panel tonight. First and foremost is an incredible trailblazer in veterinary medicine, I just have to say. Heather Prendergast, who is an RVT, CVPM, SPHR, lots to say there, but what makes her even wickedly cooler is she is the very first veterinary technician to preside over the board of directors for the Viticus Group, and she is the CEO of Synergy Veterinary Consulting. Insert applause, like amazing. Then we also have the wickedly cool Beckie Mossor, who is an RVT. She is the founder of the Veterinary Giving Tree. For those of you who have not yet donated to it, please do, please do, please do. In fact, I'll put the link in there so that you can. It is an amazing organization. And she is the president-elect of NAVTA. So she is going to be your leader. Then we also have, wow, she is the veterinary technician of the year. Okay, Sam Geiling, she's an RVT and she is the co-chair for the NAVTA's Government Relations Committee. And by the way, she happens to also be the chief of staff for the Animal Policy Group. And I do want to call them out really quick because they've also been a longtime supporter of the Bridge Club Animal Policy Group. We adore you. And thank you for allowing us to steal Sam tonight. And then finally, and most importantly, is our very own Shannon Nowak. Shannon is not only our VP of Education at the Bridge Club, but she has her BS. She is an LVT. She's an RVT. She is the secretary of the North Carolina Association for Veterinary Technicians. So she is a force in herself, and she will be taking over the moderating tonight. So I am going to cut myself off at this point, turn this on over to these folks to have an incredible, robust conversation. So I'm going to mute myself. Go for it.
Thank you. This is different because it's like, ooh, turn it over to me, right? But before I do my toast and get us started, for those of you who are not, you know, on the Bridge Club often, we do start with a toast. But I wanted to first, again, welcome all of you guys. This is a phenomenal lineup that we have, and I can see many familiar faces in the crowd already. So I'm honestly just humbled and honored to share this virtual stage with all of you, fangirling just a little bit. But anyway, before we toast, I kind of wanted to just let you guys know why we decided to have this conversation. So it stems from a couple different things. One, as Catherine mentioned, I'm the secretary of our state association. So I get all of the questions coming in. And I just was thinking, I don't really know that people have a clear understanding of what's going on for a lot of things, but title protection being one of them. And then, of course, talking to others and sort of sharing ideas at some of the conferences, I was getting the same feedback from others. So we thought this would be a great Bridge Club conversation. So that's kind of where it came to be. And I think, you know, there are many things we can talk about in terms of this, but given that we only have an hour, we're going to have to kind of keep it focused on title protection specifically and just move on. But we may have part 2 or 3 down the road, right? So let's do our toast and start us off. So I wanted to say that when we all got into this profession as technicians, we took an oath, right, to aid animals and their people. But I think if we sort of read between the lines there, it's really we can't help them if we don't help ourselves first situation. So for all of you guys that are here tonight, I think we are all those people that are ready to speak up, make some waves, and take action. So toast to all of you. Cheers. Oh, I have the cup backwards. Okay, so let's just jump right in. I think we should start sort of at the basics here and say, you know, what is title protection? Let's sort of get a definition out there, like what constitutes it and why is it important? Who wants to answer that?
I'd love to take the lead on this one, and then of course my amazing colleagues will kick in as well. But if we take a look at what title protection is by definition, it's a law, a statute, perhaps even a regulation that limits who can call themselves a specific title. And in our case, it is veterinary technician, or perhaps it is one of our recognized terms of a licensed veterinary technician, a certified veterinary technician, registered veterinary technician, or a licensed veterinary medical technician. But why is this important? I think that is the more important piece. Yes, we get all on the same page for title protection, but this is crucial because right now we're in a retention crisis, for lack of better terms. Now we have also had such a significant turnover in credentialed veterinary technicians, and I use credentialed as kind of being the overall, the arching term of LVT, RVT, LVMT, CVT. So of our credentialed veterinary technicians, we only have a retention rate of 5 to 7 years, and they're going on to other professions. And so to me, this is the crisis point. We can't get enough credentialed veterinary technicians in our hospitals to serve the needs of our veterinarians, to allow our veterinarians to diagnose, prescribe, and do surgery. In so many hospitals, we have veterinary assistants that are then filling in that role. And don't get me wrong, there are many, many on-the-job trained veterinary assistants that have been doing an amazing job. Moving forward, that's our crux, is we have many hospitals that are hiring the veterinary assistants, and they teach them the what and the how to do something, but they don't have the why behind what they do. So we're put into crisis situations or critical thinking modes where we really have to think about what we're doing, how we're doing it, what the impact is going to be, drug interactions, things like that. It's that schooling and that knowledge that comes with a credentialed veterinary technician that could be the difference between life and death. We have veterinary assistants working at lower wages that are competing, or I guess I should say our credentialed veterinary technicians are competing for those roles, but they're being paid at a lower wage, which doesn't allow them to pay back student loans if they have student loans that they have accumulated over their last several years. And so we have a vicious cycle where we have many veterinary assistants filling in the title or the role of veterinary technician. Our clients don't know the difference. They think that their pets are getting the skilled veterinary technicians of those that have gone to school, but they are not. And this cycle is going to continue. It's not going to stop while we allow our veterinary assistants to do the skills of a veterinary technician or to call themselves a veterinary technician when they are in fact not. So to me, title protection is critical. It's crucial in order to move our industry forward and to move our care to a higher level.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned, so there is a lot of variation, obviously, in the title itself, like from state to state. What do we think, like, what are the factors that contribute to that, and how's that influencing what's going on?
Well,
here?
it's confusing. It's confusing from whatever state we move to, right? So we have the CVTs, we have RVTs, LVTs, LVMTs. Around 20-ish states, CVTs, plus or minus 15-ish states with registered veterinary technician, 15-ish licensed veterinary technician. We have Tennessee that's an LVMT, but it's different in every state. And every state, well, some states define title protection, some states don't. Some states will define a scope of practice, some states don't. And I have found even within my consulting of veterinary hospitals, most people don't know what a Veterinary Practice Act is. They don't know what rules and regulations are. They don't know that there is even a title protection or that there could be fines imposed. And so the confusion then comes from, well, I talked to my friend who lives in North Carolina that she gets to utilize her technician to do very advanced procedures, but that's very different than maybe a technician that's in Kansas where there's very little definition of what a veterinary technician does or can do. So I think that confusion creates the inconsistencies. And then we have the he said, she said in many of our states.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yes, I think we need to dive into that a little bit more, but I also feel like this conversation is not new, right? Like we're always talking about this. So I want to just sort of discuss a little bit about, like, has there actually been any progress? I mean, I've been a technician for quite a while, but some people on this call maybe haven't, and we just want to touch on, like, why do we keep having this same conversation, and why can't we just fix it? Has there been any progress?
I would like to. I recognize many of my fellow veterinary technicians that have been here since the 80s when the National Association of Veterinary Technicians in America was created, when we were called animal health technicians. So we've been having this conversation, gosh, for what is that, 30 years? trying to move this forward. So as we look at the past of being an animal health technician, and then in, gosh, was it 1989, 1990-ish that AVMA approved that we called veterinary technicians, and moving that forward, the progress, I think, has been very slow up until about the 2015. And I think after 2015, 2017, we have started making quicker progression than we've had in the past. So we are making slow progression. I would like to say quicker progression now, especially as many of the states are starting to really look into it a little bit more, looking for title protection, looking for being able to put in a scope of practice and defining what that looks like. Beckie, a little more from your perspective.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I first came in this profession, you know, I remember there are even people on this call who, you know, I had my rose-colored glasses and I was like, we're going to make big change. And just hearing so often, like, it's never going to change. We've been trying forever. And there's just, I think, a lot of things within society that it's like, we're not going to ask for change anymore. We're going to make that change. And I think veterinary technicians have really stepped up and said, we're done kind of asking for change. And now we've empowered and educated ourselves. And we've organized ourselves in a way that we're going to make these progressions no matter what. And because of that, we've picked up this momentum that you're talking about, right? And that we are now moving forward. I like the Finding Nemo, kind of trying to get everybody to swim down in that same direction, I think has really taken a lot of movement. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see. So I know that with my upcoming presidency, obviously I have a lot of goals. I have a lot of things I'd like to see and continue that are already happening. But more than anything, I think what we've seen is involvement. And as we get these technicians involved in their state associations, our national associations, our numbers are up. Bridge club events like this feature technicians, feature what we're doing. Like, we're becoming part of a mainstream conversation. And I think that's a lot of what we needed. And I think that's what will keep us moving forward. So kind of projecting that next 10 years, I do see a lot of change. I think this is as exciting time as ever for our profession. But there's a lot of conversations, you know, obviously things can kind of get rolling a little out of control. And I think that's what we're truly working on when it comes to title protection and getting all of our states together.
Right. I think, like you guys said, there's a lot that has happened recently, right? So I think Sam has some details about that and even a visual, right? To talk about sort of practice acts and what's happened there. Is this a good time to jump into that? Sam, are you ready to share it?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. I have a few resources, a couple from NAVTA and then one from Animal Policy Group. So this one came from Pet Desk and NAVTA in a collaboration in 2022. So I think it's really important to understand what sort of state documents drive title protection. And so you can have the Veterinary Practice Act, which provides state oversight and you know, how the credentialing process works and like eligibility and requirements. And then there's also regulations and regulations. And so the Practice Act has to go through the state legislature. So it's can be intimidating and a bit daunting process to go through. I did it when I lived in Hawaii. I got RVT passed while I was living there. And the regulations are what the state board can put together. And so those are, if you have at least agreement with the state board, a little bit easier, at least as far as the process goes. It can be, there's always challenges on both sides, right? Convincing the legislators what you need, why things are important, how it relates to animal welfare, animal health, right? Public protection, all of that. And then with regulations, making sure that the veterinarians in the state all sort of agree and the board can support that. So this one, the purple ones have what we call limited protection. The pink ones have general protection. So in those cases, the vet techs are written into the Practice Act, and if it has limited protection, then it's more likely that it only has a definition where vet tech is defined, but there's no punishment, maybe we should say, if you misuse the title. What that really boils down to is that the board can't take action if somebody misuses the title, where if you have general protection, and so that means the, LVT, RVT, licensed vet tech, veterinary technician, all of those terms would be written into your Practice Act as far as what constitutes a veterinary technician, what requirements you need to meet. And if you only have a definition, but no repercussions if somebody else uses the title, then that's more limited protection. And then the states in the more darker blue have no state oversight. There's a couple that have asterisks because this is in 2022, so some of them have switched over to having state oversight now. Minnesota, which is where I live now, our bill is going through. It's going to be seen tomorrow, and then it has to make its way to the full floor and then to the governor. So it still has a few levels to go through, but Minnesota will, knock on wood, go from a CVT state to an LVT state soon. So it's good to kind of have a sense of where your state lies, what titles you use, but also like where do you get the information to figure out how much protection you have in your state, how much oversight the board can provide, and how much support they can provide if somebody is actively misusing the title. So NAVTA also put together, the VNI put together the title protection report. This is multiple pages, right? It's 20 pages long, so I can't go through the whole thing, but there are some key pieces that I want to highlight in here. So this table identifies which titles are used in which states. This one gives you a sense of like if there's a definition, if there's a limited title definition or general title definition, and then what kind of protection there is in your Practice Act. So there's like all these little asterisks behind of like which one each says too. But if you come down a little bit further, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is how many people were surveyed. I don't want to make you queasy by going too fast. How many people were surveyed and didn't actually know, even in the state that they live in? And so like title protection exists in the State Practice Act. So you see how many no's there are here. So again, that means like, are there repercussions written out that people can't use the title actually vet tech or veterinary technician? But if you take a larger state like California or even Georgia, Indiana, there were quite a few folks, and a lot of them know, but in some states like Louisiana, only 6.7% of the people who responded to the survey got it quote correct of whether they had title protection or not in their state. So and then at Animal Policy Group, we use this map quite often to kind of get a sense of where the vet techs are at as far as levels of supervision or regulations, which I recognize doesn't solely fall into title protection, and it goes into more scope of practice and supervisory levels, which could be like part 2 and part 3, because vet techs have a lot of layers in that goes into how much differentiation there is between the veterinary assistants. So so the colorful map is kind of nice to see, and you can kind of go through it. But there's some states where there's no duties specified. Again, that's scope of practice, not title protection. And then the stricter ones where there's outlined tasks under direct and indirect supervision. Regulations, this is kind of like which title gets used where. And then levels of supervision, we use this for, tasks that the vet techs can perform, whether it's written out into the Practice Act or not, or veterinarian discretion, and or it's only written into regulations, so it's on the board, or the state doesn't outline veterinary technician tasks at all in their Practice Act. So in those ones, you may have title protection only, and there's no difference in duties between a vet tech and a vet assistant legally. So, yeah, it's important to kind of get a sense, and you can see how complicated it is from state to state. There's really not been a huge push to try to standardize everything, right? Where you're actually involving all of the states, all of the vet tech associations. Through NAVTA last fall, I did host a legislative strategies workshop, and that was really nice to get people that had similar, that were in similar states with similar oversight together and say, like, what do you guys want it to look like? And you can kind of move together and push the needle forward. So.
So I'm trying to read and type. We have a lot of really, really good questions coming in, which I think some of them we will answer kind of through our natural flow of conversation. But I know I wanted to back up a little bit to kind of what we're talking about, just the factors that contribute to the difference in title protection, like from state to state. Because I think we had a map of that too, which again, you guys, if you don't know, like we never share our screen or do like PowerPoint presentations on the Bridge Club. So that just shows you like how important this really is, that we're like, hey, you can share a slide if you want. And Sam, had permission to share much more than a slide. So this is a big deal. But yeah, Beckie, did you want to touch on that a bit, or do we? I think Heather maybe had that map, if I remember right. The other one. No?
The map of the individual state registration.
Yeah, which I think.
Sorry, Shannon.
Yes.
I think Sam had shared that was in their very first
at
one.
the beginning.
In the,
okay.
Pet
okay.
Map, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, my bad. And then, I have too many things open here. Okay. So as long as we mentioned that too, and then let's talk about sort of some of the questions, which we'll get to, sort of how is this enforced. But I think another point to add, which I think Beckie, you can probably speak on, is like amongst ourselves, how can we start making sure that this is going the right direction, right? Like it's not just what are our governing bodies doing for us. Catherine, you have your hand up. What's up?
I do. So I just want, before we jump into that conversation, because I thought what was really cool here, and that map is really critically important, that came from Pet Desk, and we will share that out with everyone so you understand, because I do think in particular when you're looking at what is the title in Illinois versus in Maryland, because I saw the saying, well, there's new regulations being passed that they're saying anyone who's not an RVT. I just want to be clear, because each state is different in what they adhere to. So can you guys talk through that really quick so there isn't confusion of someone who's in Illinois is having a heart attack, and I'll remute. Okay, go.
Well, can I also just ask a question, and maybe you guys can answer this at the same time? Are any of the states, one or more profiles, considered sort of ideal?
I think there's pieces and parts that are really great, but there's no one state that has it all nailed down. I don't think you could take pieces and parts from all of them and build the perfect Practice Act for veterinary technicians, but no one's got it right now. And to talk to those maps and say like, oh, Illinois is off or this state is off, it's hard to keep these maps up to date because so many advancements are being made all the time, especially recently, which to me is a good thing. Like if the map is a little out of date, I'm like, well, shoot, that means progress was made, right? So not a bad
celebration.
Yeah. Dang, we have to update the map.
Yeah. Perfect. So yeah, Beckie,
one thing that we talk about a little bit is those variations in the factors, and I think Sam talked a little bit about the idea that it's a lot of it is governed by the state in terms of whether we're called an RVT, LVT, CVT, LVMT, whatever that is. But I think a lot of the essence of the conversation really just lies in that vet tech title and the insinuation of a credential that doesn't exist, right? And I think that's where things get a little hairy. Is I don't think the real problem, while we do need to probably sort it out, isn't RVT, LVT, CVT, LVMT. It's really that there's this title and usage of a term, veterinary technician, that is, as I'm becoming notorious for saying, has been made to be a position and not a profession. And really, we are a profession. We are a set of professionals that serve a position in the hospital. And so to me, that title protection has to come within ourselves first. And when people talk about why is this still a constant discussion, I hold my colleagues accountable. I hold my colleagues accountable in that we don't report misusage of title because of whistleblower laws, because we want to be employed, right? Because it's hard to do that. But like, if we're not calling it out, if we're not protecting our title the most, then why would anybody else care as much as we do? So we're asking everybody around us to use it appropriately, and then on a regular basis referring to people who are not credentialed as veterinary technicians. And we're not doing it across the board, and then we're not taking legal and appropriate action when it comes down to it. And I know that that's hard to do, but until we fight for it, why would anybody else?
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm calling out here. Oh, go ahead. I love what Rebecca said in the chat. She said, we're a young profession experiencing professional growth, going through adolescence after 45 years. I think that sums it up very well. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that we can model back even to the human nursing side, is that they went through this exact same growth hurdle as they tried to progress. You know, they had many on the job trained nurses back in the day that we had to go through, or they had to go through the title protection and putting in the scope of practice, and they evolved rapidly after that. But they experienced the very exact same thing that we are experiencing. And I think that goes to, I'll say that we have to be aligned with some of our allied organizations to move this forward even faster. So as Beckie talked about, that we have to be an advocate for ourselves. We have to be an advocate within our own states, within our own practices. But it is also aligning with our veterinarians. It is aligning with our AVMA, with our AHAs, with our organizations that also can help promote the importance of a credentialed veterinary technician, the skills and the title protection that go with it. So by getting aligned, we can push this faster down the road.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Too,
I'll just throw that out.
Right. I agree. And I think I just want to add to that, a big piece that people aren't necessarily talking about is that we really need to focus on educating the pet owners on this too, because as we mentioned in the beginning, pet owners are a bit naive. They bring their pets in, they expect everything's going to be great, and everybody that works there is super qualified to do everything, right? And they don't necessarily understand the difference between a credentialed tech and the other staff members that are there. So I think from a practice standpoint, or from our standpoint, if we can be the ones saying, you know, these are the different roles in the hospital, and these are the things that I was educated and trained to do, then those pet owners are going to be demanding that they have that level of care. And I think that will further just, you know, drive our point forward. So we sort of need to attack it from different angles. All right, we still have a lot to cover, I guess, right? I think, do we want to talk about enforcement now? I know there were quite a few comments. I'll have to kind of scroll through to see the specifics, but I think Aaron mentioned that Maryland recently passed something kind of giving them some protection, but it's not being enforced at all. And I know that that's happened in other states too. So what does that look like, enforcement state to state, and what can we do about that?
I think the biggest piece is knowing what the actual word for word is in your practice act. So that's what you need to do first, is if you're not sure what it says, then go and read it and go through both the practice act and the regulations, and then it will tell you what you can do, right? So as we saw right from NAVTA's title protection report, there are a lot of states who define veterinary technician, but if it doesn't have any repercussions, then the board is limited in what they can do. So if the Practice Act says a licensed veterinary technician is da 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 da, but then it gets really hairy, right? Like if someone says, well, I'm a vet tech, and it's like, well, the law doesn't say vet tech, it says licensed veterinary technician. And to me, that's just like a little bit also on the practice leadership, right? So you have to know what the Practice Act says, and then you need to know how to contact the veterinary board. The state veterinary board is the one that's responsible for enforcement. And if they hear it enough times, it is their job. You can't say, oh, the board doesn't enforce it. They have to. They have to enforce it if it's in the Practice Act. They don't have the option. And so what you need to do is figure out the reporting process. So someone might say, well, the board doesn't do anything about it. Well, did you report it? Did you say in my clinic or hospital they're misusing the title, right? On the website, all it says is veterinary technicians, and then it lists the whole team, right? If you have proof that way, then everyone has to take responsibility, right? You have to be the one to report it. If you go to practice leadership and they say, whatever, we don't care, we're just gonna leave it as it is, then that is the next step. So it's much more difficult in the states that have limited protection.
And I think in those states where there's limited protection, Sam, that we do have those discussions with our practice leadership, because this is impacting our individual practices when if we have leadership that just says, well, whatever, it doesn't matter, because it does matter, and it's going to continue impacting them as a veterinary business owner. And we are not going to be able to advance the level of veterinary medical care that we know we can provide in our veterinary practices. And it also limits the veterinarian's ability to deliver high level scope, where doctors get to diagnose, prescribe, and do surgery when they don't have credentialed technicians in place. So it is revenue limiting by not putting this in place in individual practices as well.
Yeah. And I think with reporting anything, there's always sort of that fear, like if you're the person reporting, like, how does that come back on me? So does someone want to mention that? Like, can I get in trouble for reporting someone, or should I be worried? Is that why people are not doing it?
Like, right? I think there's a big fear of doing that. North Carolina doesn't necessarily protect whistleblower. Like you have the right to face your accused. So in some cases, your name may be brought up in that, and you could end up being a problem child. And so I do think that is one of the reasons. I don't think it's the entire reason. I think that some people don't know how, Serena, like, snitches get stitches. But I think a point was made well in the chat of, we respect these people. It's hard to report people you respect. We care about these people. They're part of our team, and it's not their fault. So many times I have met people who use the title veterinary technician because they were given to it by their employer and don't even know they're breaking law. They don't even know that's not allowed. Okay. So it's so layered. And I think there's a lot of reasons why reporting is hard, and standing up to your employer is hard, and feeling empowered is hard. Confrontational conversations are hard, or like Ms. Heather likes to call them, courageous conversations, because those are hard, right? We don't want to do something against that person, but we have a frustration with the fact that they're using this title. That is a sticky, difficult place to be in, and we don't have a lot of guidance and moral and ethical balance there, I think, in a lot of cases. I have so many veterinary assistants, because honestly, there's no such thing as an unlicensed technician. So like, when you're using that, you're like loopholing yourself around this title situation, right? There, it's not a thing in most states. But I have veterinary assistants that I would ask to take care of my pets over credentialed technicians that I have known over and over and over again. They are amazing, and it is not their fault they're in this position. It's not personal. This is professional.
Yeah.
Great point, Becky.
Yeah. And I know there's some, this is sort of going back a bit too, but there's some sort of like sticky gray areas that people say, well, what about these professionals that I've been working alongside with forever who are now maybe in sort of like the states that allow alternate route things. So they've been an assistant or they've been unlicensed, but now they're going through the process to become a technician, but they're still sort of using that terminology. Like how do we handle that?
Are there, someone asked the question, are there any recommended penalties out there for using the title if they should not be using it, or is it just a cease and desist kind of thing?
That's a good point.
There are a few states that do have outlined penalties specifically. So some have fines, some have misdemeanors, some I think it's Indiana, right, has fine or imprisonment. But to me, it's a little bit tricky to always put it on the individual, especially in those situations where they were given the title by practice leadership. And to me, the fines should go to the practices.
Yeah. And this might be silly too, but in terms of knowing, I mean, I know you said, you know, you need to know where your practice act is and read it, but I think there are sometimes questions because it's a lot of legal jargon, right? So what if you're not legally inclined? Like, how can you better understand that language in your practice
You
act?
call Mark and you say, hey, Mark, I don't understand this legal language. No, but you know, one thing I wanted to add to that point is another layer of difficulty, right? Because when you start talking about things like misdemeanor charges, you now have to find a DA who is emotionally and time invested into bringing those actual charges. So what we keep seeing in this chat and what we keep seeing over and over again is this almost unenforceable. Therefore, to me, prioritizing self-policing, because in a lot of cases, it's just not going. I mean, I don't know a DA in my state that's going to prioritize busting some veterinary assistant for misusing the title, nor should they probably prioritize that, right? But it's a double, our hands are double tied in that case, because even when you can do something, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Yes. For some initial help with decoding your practice act too, you can always reach out to NAVTA's government relations committee, and we'll help you go through it. We got a whole committee for that. We read practice acts on our lunch breaks. So.
Sounds
So
riveting.
we have a model. Does NAVTA have a model like cease and desist or education letter? Because I think we do have that as a resource, or have in the past, as Sherry was asking. And I think that we do provide some of that language to state associations and folks who are looking for that, to how to make that recommendation to other practices. And that's exactly what we need, is those types of tools to empower.
Yeah. All right. Cheryl, do you know if there are any other questions that I should bring forward right now? Because I'm trying to read while I'm talking.
Well, I know,
so.
well, some people were asking the question about, you know, veterinary nurse, because
Yes.
I know that, is it Purdue where are they still calling their graduates veterinary nurses now?
Well, they have a veterinary nursing program.
Okay.
And quite a few
Quite a few.
programs have veterinary nursing programs versus veterinary technology programs. So
Right. So
I want to say it's maybe upwards of about 20 now of veterinary nursing programs.
So would that also, like, how would that work? You know, we're trying to get, you know, LVT, RVT, CVT, all the VTs, you know, credentialed or title protection. How does the veterinary nursing fit into all of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it adds, you know, maybe there's another layer of confusion that it adds because we're adding another title, whereas many of those students will graduate with they may graduate with their veterinary nursing degree, but by the state, they are going to be credentialed veterinary technician for whatever RVT, CVT, LVT, LVMT, depending on what state they're in.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Still too. Sorry.
No, a great question came through about,
Thank
like,
you.
just to help out. I was trying to
Yes.
like this. The idea of going from state to state. So right now you can't, so I'll pass that over to Shannon. Okay.
Yeah, no, I see it now too. Yeah, which that comes up a lot too in all of the states that I've lived in. So what if you are, you're living and working in one state, you're credentialed there, but then you move somewhere else where you maybe don't work or you don't meet the requirements of that state to be credentialed. Like how does that, go about, and can you still call yourself a technician in your new place, or like what are we doing about that?
And
You can't.
it goes state to state, right? Like you still have to adhere to the state laws. So for example, here in North Carolina, you have to have graduated from an AVMA accredited college to get a license and therefore call yourself licensed in North Carolina. Now, if you hold a current license in, say, like Florida, and you live in North Carolina, you're still a licensed technician. No one's taking your license away from you, but you're not licensed in North Carolina. And so there's loopholes and caveats people find their way kind of working through. But in terms of being credentialed in this state, alternate pathways are not honored. And so that's an important part of our title protection, is ensuring that it is written into our practice acts that alternate pathways are not going to be awarded these titles. And we see alternate pathways. Sam has done some incredible work on the Government Relations Committee in keeping an eye on these states that are looking toward alternate pathways, and NAVTA is working really hard to raise their voice against that way. But states also have the ability to write in title protection that makes it so that they have to have met the minimum requirements as it stands, for that title.
Yeah. So I know there was written loophole there. And so there's 3 obvious states who still allow the alternate pathway. And what I mean by that is indefinitely. So there with no closed date in sight. So sometimes, very often, when states pass their practice act to include veterinary technicians, they will open the VTNE up to people with X number of years, X number of hours of experience, whatever they include in there. So when we did that in Hawaii, you had to have 5 years of experience, however many hours that was, but all of those hours had to be in the state of Hawaii. And the VTNE was open for 3 years, and then it closed, and then you had to go to school. So, so Alaska has an alternate pathway. California does, although there are hours and training requirements in California that are pretty specific. And then the trickiest of them all, right, Terry, is Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't have a residency clause. And so all of the states that don't have clear title protection, people can never step foot in the state of Wisconsin, claim Wisconsin as they take the VTNE, and then essentially tell the public, present themselves as a credentialed veterinary technician, and they are technically through Wisconsin. And so to me, there needs to be a lot of pressure put on Wisconsin. They've made it very clear that they don't want to change that. And it's really going to have to be a lot of pressure from the entire profession, I think, to make that change. Like Wisconsin probably has thousands and thousands and thousands of credentialed veterinary technicians, many of whom have never visited the state. So that's the trickiest of them all.
Yeah. So what if you're in one of those states that is doing some sort of like grandfather clause or looping people in with on-the-job training? Because I feel like there was something recently circulated, and I want to say it was from Washington, where they're trying to do some sort of apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
But, what if you're one of these people who, you don't want people like that to necessarily become technicians because you want them to get education? Obviously, we need to allow time for that to happen, but like, what can we do as like a normal technician to sort of fight against that?
Well, the veterinary board in Washington doesn't seem to care what the rest of the profession wants, because there's been a lot of pressure put on they call themselves the VBOG, right? They are staying the course for that apprenticeship pathway. So I read through, I don't even remember how many hundreds of pages it was of testimony trying to fight that, and they still decided to go forward with it. So I don't know what all the situations were and how a state entity can decide to do its own thing despite that much opposition, but there we are.
Yeah, I don't know if we have anybody from Washington on here, but if we do, that would be nice to get their input too, to see how they feel about it. But I know we are getting a bit late here too, so I also just wanted to make sure like we didn't miss any other super important questions, but I know it sounds like we still have a ton more to talk about. So if you guys don't mind, like in the chat, putting topics that you feel like we still need to address this in regards to what we're talking about today, that would be super helpful.
If I could ask, can we go through what people can do now? Because I think
Yes.
it's come up again. What are we supposed to do? So can we have each of our panel really walk through what they are encouraging everyone who's on this call to do now?
Becky, why don't you kick us off with the practice level? Because I think that's just critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think really it's about starting at ground level and being advocates for yourself and for your profession. And there's ways to advocate without being confrontational, and there's ways to stand up for yourself and to inform. And we have a right to do that, you know, and it doesn't have to be personal against anyone in the clinic or anyone who's really good at their job. It just has to do with the fact that, again, we're a profession, not a position. So if you don't hold that title from a license, and you are not one of those professionals, just end of story. It just, we don't have to make it a shameful thing. Veterinary assistants are amazing, and their role should be celebrated as well. So I guess my one, because I have like 20, but my one thing to do right now would be advocate for yourself and to stop using the title incorrectly yourself.
And I think my one request within our state veterinary medical associations is also to educate our veterinarians that are part of the VMAs to have a greater impact on each of those state areas within each state, and really having the veterinarians understand the impact of the life longevity of this. If we don't make a stop to it, we won't have credentialed veterinary technicians at all in the future. We've already decreased the number of credentialed or technician students that want to enroll in veterinary technology programs. So if we look at the trajectory of that, we already have identified that we're going to be 50,000 veterinary technicians short by what, 2030? And I may have said that may be a little bit higher number than what was originally projected, but we also have then decreased enrollments that we have to consider as a part of that. So we have to make an impact and start making those changes at that local level if we want to have credentialed veterinary technicians as a profession moving forward.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say is a lot of people really get a little up in arms about the VTNE specifically and access to the VTNE, and that the AAVSB owns that exam. The AAVSB follows what the states say as far as who's eligible to take the exam. They don't make the laws in the state of who gets to sit for that exam. So if you are in a state that has an alternate pathway, they're going to be able to sit for the VTNE if they meet those requirements, as long as that's what the state says that they can do. So to be really upset with the AAVSB is like, they're just following what the state says. So that's really critical for people to understand. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the Government Relations Committee for NAVTA. It's given NAVTA kind of a sort of new leg of support for members and for the state vet tech associations. I hope to offer that legislative strategies workshop again, and maybe again and again, and just continue that conversation and bringing people in who want to make those changes. So I think it's really important to, network within your state, know who's done what the future goals are, connecting with the veterinary medical associations, sitting in on the board meetings. Go to your state board and listen, be the person in the room. Rebecca's dancing. Be the person in the room who they're like, oh, this is a vet tech question. But you know what? Rebecca's been going to these Colorado board meetings since the dawn of the dinosaurs. No, not that long. I love you. And maybe we should ask her. That's the thing, right? You sit in those board meetings long enough and then they go, ooh, maybe we should ask, even though you don't sit on the board, what do you think about this, right? And then eventually, if you are in a state, about half of the states don't have a vet tech sitting on the state veterinary board. The next thing you do is ask. You ask, what's the process to get a vet tech seat on this board? If you're in a now I'm on the board, so you have to be there. Yeah, that's the process, right? There's so many pieces, so many things that you can do that feel like a small step that aren't. Going from not having a vet tech seat on the state board to having a vet tech seat on the state board is a big leap. That's a big jump forward. And so all of those advancements should be celebrated because it's one more step in getting the vet techs up a level, right? Up to where we need to be. So there
And I
are
will say,
Y'all need to
Aaron
be in
Butler
the
just
room where it
applied.
happens, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but hang on. Aaron Butler just applied to be for Maryland. So let's just give a little like a hoot
Yeah.
on that. So for the
And I
record,
couldn't agree more. I feel like there are far too many conversations about technicians that do not involve technicians. So we just need to do what we can to be a part of those, like whether we have to invite ourselves in, like we need to be there and be part of that decision.
And
making.
Shannon, you know, even talking about the progression of where we have come from 10 years ago, there were no technicians on board, you know, sitting in board positions. Maybe if there was, maybe one, but that is the amount of progress that we have had even within our boards moving forward to have that voice and to be able to get better protection in there.
Yeah. Awesome. And I also want to just put a plug. I think if you are in a state that has a vet tech association, please consider joining. Or if you are in one that doesn't, please consider starting one. I know that there, you know, plenty of other states can help you. I think NAVTA has resources too that they can help you, but that again is just another, like, let's band together and keep things moving forward. Because a lot of our medical boards, you know, if you go to them as a single person and say, this is what we should do, they're going to laugh at you because you're one of, you know, 3,000 people in your state that are registered tech. But if you represent the majority of people, they're going to take it a lot more seriously.
And I would also like to be
numbers. Sorry, Heather.
You good?
We need that strength in numbers, but it's also really important to be active. You know, unfortunately, I see apathy and complacence in folks, and there are states that have vet techs on boards, and none of the vet techs in the state know who they are, hear from them, know that they're representing their voice. There is a big disconnect. You know, don't assume that the people who are doing the job for you are doing the job for you. Make sure you're there and in the room and having that conversation and a part of it. And constantly pushing for that advocacy. Being involved is crucial. And when people question the value of being in these professional associations, this is it.
And I'm a huge advocate for having a good relationship between the state veterinary technician association and the state veterinary medical association. Like, there has to be a synergy between the two of those to have a greater push within the state. And many of our state associations, there's zero alignment, zero communication, and almost hatred for one another. But that is what really pushes and moves forward in those states, is those that have a unified messaging and goal to achieve. And I think that's critical.
So I'm just going to throw this out there for anyone who doesn't know how to get engaged in any way, shape, or form. First of all, we have the most extraordinary panel of individuals that have been leading this discussion. But if you also look around the source of people whose faces are also on this chat, please, if you don't know who they are, contact Shannon, myself, Dr. Good. We will connect you. We will make this happen, because that's what we're here for. Because if we know someone that you need to know, we'll make it happen. Okay, I'll shut up. Okay.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
And I was feeling that a little bit looking around this. Like, I feel like this is an echo chamber, because so many of the people on this call, as I flip through there, are just advocates after advocates and people who have paved the way. And so, you know, the people who need to hear it the most, unfortunately, aren't on this call, but we need to remain united and inspired in our message to make sure we're dripping it everywhere we go, because the people on this call are making the difference.
So I
Right.
make the commitment that the Bridge Club will share this exact same video with every state association. We will get this out to every single one. And then we will also, we've got our partner, one of our partners on here right now, Kirk Augustine. And then I know Shannon's writing a few articles, but guys, we can get the word out. This is very important for everyone to hear. So if we're not doing a good enough job, you tap me on the shoulder and say, if you promise to do more, we will. I want to make sure we get this out.
And
Yeah.
Peter just said he wants to use his social media platform to help with
Us,
everything
yeah.
too. So the more the merrier.
Yeah. And same, like we want all of you guys to share it out to everyone you know too, because the more people we get talking about this, the more, change that we're gonna make. So yes. All right. Well, we've got just a couple minutes left. So I think this is probably a good point to stop, wrap things up. So we will send out these links in a follow-up email and post them on our social channels. So if you guys don't have them written down, now you will. But yeah, we always close everything with a toast too. So I think
But
Beckie,
before
Go
we
ahead.
turn over, can we just do a huge thank you to
Yes.
Heather Prendergast? She's the busiest woman on the planet by being in the role that she's playing with Viticus Group. I want to make sure. Sam Geiling. Oh my gosh, this woman works long hours. Look at what she's putting maps together. She's in part of all of this and also part of NAVTA Governor Affairs. And Beckie Mossor, for good God's sake, everything that she is doing in this world, and as our president-elect, or I should say your president-elect, being able to come into NAVTA, this is incredible. And for our very, very own Shannon Noack, who I absolutely personally adore, and if we can just keep getting her out there so more people see how amazing she is, I would be just so happy. But so I want to thank this panel. This has been a true love for us to pull together, and we'll do more. So tell us what else we need to do. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Beckie.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I want to give credit to the author because it's beautifully written, and Miss Catherine felt as though I may not have been prepared. So I liked hers better than mine. So I got to choose. And so I'm going to share her words with a little bit of my own. But in a profession where compassion is our currency and care is our creed, let's raise our glasses to pledge to safeguard the title that represents our expertise and our dedication. Let's stand united in our commitment to protect our profession's integrity, ensure that the title of CVT, RVT, LVT, LVMT remains synonymous with excellence, compassion, and expertise. And I hope within our profession, the best of the past becomes the worst of our future.
Cheers.
Aw,
That's beautiful.
cheers.
You guys, thank you for all of you coming. This has been lovely. I hope you've had a great time.